I finally got one. I finally caught an autistic character. A while ago, I watched the show Parenthood with my mum. We were having like a moment of just like slice of life family dramas. So we loved this and we loved This Is Us. I think there were a couple of others, but those were like the two that stuck out the most to me. And so in Parenthood, they brought in a character that I was like, this man is so autistic coded, because the show also is, like I said, based around family slice of life stuff. Parenthood is a show about the Braverman family through the years. It's about 6 seasons. We love a good family drama in this house, but it is hard finding good ones and ones that lasted longer than a couple of seasons. One of the Bravermans has a son who turns out to be autistic. That's kind of the main plot for that part of the family, or like a good consistent plot that continues is basically this family are all learning how to understand autism, cope with being a parent to an autistic child, school struggles, the whole lot. And I think it's quite an interesting plot line. There are a few things that I personally was not a massive fan of, but like that's not what I'm talking about today. I'm not talking about that plot line. The autistic son is called Max. He struggles in school due to his social differences. He is not the nicest child, and I'd say he borders sort of the low to mid support needs. His family work against him a lot when they could be working with him much more easily. He doesn't take in some of the explanation that does happen, and is quite a strong PDA autistic. So pathological demand avoidance is the technical name, and he also doesn't really emote at all outside of anger and meltdowns, which I think his older sister finds hard. He is also very touch averse, so there's a lot of things that you can recognize in his character in particular, but I am talking about an adult who comes in around season 4, Hank. Hank is a photographer who hires Sarah, who Sarah is one of Max's aunties. Sarah and Hank get close, but Sarah breaks it off as she's engaged at the time to Mark Sia? I think it's Mr. Sia, who is the teacher of her kids, basically. He was the high school English teacher. Sarah makes poor decisions constantly, and I personally think she is ADHD coded, because almost every character that particular actress plays is ADHD coded. So, but I think it works well with the dynamics that her character has with Hank. Hank says, "Do the fiancés usually get included in family portraits?" And then they kind of get into this whole like conversation about it, and he just kind of goes, "I don't really care. I don't charge by the head." Just from personal experience, usually usually I have to edit somebody out. She kind of fandangles herself a job with him, as he has like a help wanted sign in the window, even though the show is, I think, in about 2016 at the time. So, not like nowhere does a help wanted in the window sign anymore. He's very set in his particular ways. At the first job they go on together, we find that Sarah has the personability that Hank does not have when working with people. The customer lost their father recently, so they wanted to grab a family photo ASAP whilst everyone was still in town after the funeral, I think. And Hank was not any good at dealing with that particular problem. But Sarah is immediately sympathetic, emotive, and isn't averse to touch, and like gives people hugs and like comforting pats on the arm and things like that. Hank is hard to work with, both as a customer and as his assistant. He's very particular. He's kind of a perfectionist slash he has his ways he does things, and he expects his expectations to be met. It is me. Hello? Does somebody write Hank based off of me 10 years later? However, Sarah is a compulsive, slash impulsive liar. She lied about the experience she had with photography and messed up most of the photo shoot. But like I said, Hank's standards are so high, it's impossible to please him anyway, even if she was doing really well. He's literally taking family photos, but he has the standards of an artist. Hank first meets Max at the family portrait taking after he fires Sarah. So he fires Sarah and he still has to go and take their whole family portrait. He's been taking their family portrait for years, I think. You see Sarah's fiance, who is very young compared to Sarah. I think Sarah is like maybe in her early 50s. Her fiance is 29. So Max is putting black olives on his fingers, just minding his own business, and Hank is near him. He says to Max that he's a little weird, and Max is like, yep. And Hank just kind of goes, I like you. And then Max goes, I don't know if I like you yet. And then just walks off. Hank is surprised by that interaction, but kind of pleasantly surprised. He feels like, I think maybe he's finally met his match for the most antisocial person around, maybe. Another day, Sarah is at Hank's shop looking at the photos he took of her family, and he says Max would never look at the lens, which I thought was also an interesting choice slash observation, choice for like the script writers and stuff to do. Because I wonder if that's kind of a common thing as well, maybe. Like, do other autistic people who also struggle with eye contact, do they also struggle to look into the lens of cameras? Because I mean, I don't look into the lens of my camera. I look at me. And I've always done that. I think a lot of people do that. But I wonder, are there people who purposefully look at the lens for their photos? I don't know. But anyway, let me know. Anyway, Sarah says that Max is autistic, and Hank is like, I knew something was up. But he calls him a good kid. As Sarah is leaving, he says to tell her mum if it doesn't work out with Sarah and Junior, so Sarah's fiance, he could always Photoshop him out at a small minimal cost. One of the main differences you see with Hank and Max is that Hank knows how to joke, whereas Max does not. Hank does also say to Sarah that the people at the shoot really liked her. She's good at the schmoozing, which isn't really a word we use in England much, schmoozing. And he hates talking to clients and gets sick to his stomach. And, she's not as awful as he thought. He may have fired her a little bit too soon, And he's basically offering the job back to her without actually saying so. But he does say that she has to actually learn about photography. If she's going to actually continue working with him, she's got to learn about photography. Hank, I noticed as well, has a very loud, blunt inflection when talking, especially with people he doesn't know well or is in conversation about emotions, difficult conversations, which is quite a common thing. A lot of autistic people struggle to moderate the volume of their voice without realizing. He also has a particular way that he does things, like I was saying, or the way he likes things being done. He struggles to let go of control for less than perfection, which is very familiar to me. I understand, Hank. I understand you. The first time he kisses Sarah is after she helps him with his relationship between him and his 11-year-old daughter, who lives with his ex-wife in LA. They are based in San Francisco. So it's not like a massive difference in location, but it is far enough that it's just not super convenient or easy to see her regularly. He only sees her one weekend a month, and she is in that kind of stubborn, becoming a teenager phase. And honestly, he's kind of a loser dad. He's kind of a loser who doesn't get teen girls or anybody. Honestly, he's autistic as fuck. He doesn't get it. He doesn't understand the expectations or the trends of things, and he struggles to adjust to the fact that his daughter is growing up. And because he has never been particularly good at communication and relationships and maintaining relationships with people, He still associates a lot of things with his daughter that was just her when she was quite a bit younger, things that she is no longer interested in, and she's very frustrated with this association that he can't get with the program that she's, becoming a teenager. Whereas Sarah has two kids already as well, who are both older than his daughter. And one of her kids is a daughter as well, but she's also an auntie to a bunch of other kids, boys and girls, varying ages as well. So generally, she's pretty good with kids of all ages and a variety of genders and experiences and interests. And now Hank's daughter actually wants to come and spend time with him thanks to her assistants, basically. He tells Sarah all about this as he's teaching her how to develop film photos in the darkroom, and she's developing headshots of his daughter. She's so happy at how the shot has turned out, and he's just kind of looking at her, clearly having some realizations, emotions, and then he leans in to kiss her. She doesn't lean away, at least not initially or not quickly, but there is then like a moment of Hank, okay, where did that come from? What's going on? He understands that she's saying no, this can't happen, she's engaged, but also I think they both know there's something there. There's something there. Don't you feel it? And this is at the start of an episode as well, this kiss, where things start to unravel a bit for Sarah in her relationship with Mark. She does confront Hank later in the episode, and he admits it's because, she's funny, pretty, smart, great to be around, and his daughter really likes her. And that's something that's really important to him, is that his daughter likes whoever it is he may end up in a relationship with, even though it's not something he is particularly looking for or prioritizing, because he's just always struggled with that kind of thing. The reason why him and his ex-wife divorced is because his communication was terrible. He really struggled to understand his feelings. He didn't talk about anything. He would just kind of go along with whatever the ex-wife was doing, but then also get so wrapped up in things he was doing, he would then forget important things they needed to do or places to go, etc. There's a few times in the show where he does get so wrapped up in, photography related tasks that he is late somewhere or forgets something entirely. I'm not gonna lie, I thought my notes or like loose script for this video were done. My script ended there, and I found a random other paragraph on my phone. I swear I finished this script, or at least I thought I did. I don't know what happened here, but there we go. So I'm just gonna kind of have to wing it from here. Basically, eventually, Sarah and her fiance break up. She does get with Hank. They start dating for a while, but quite quickly, he decides to move to Minnesota because that's where his ex-wife is moving with their daughter because of work or something like that. Sarah does tell him he should go. They kind of try the long distance thing for a little while, and then they break up with each other. And then he ends up moving back to San Francisco anyway, quite soon, like quite quickly after all of this. Things in Minnesota were not great for work, were not great between him and his ex-wife, were not great with his daughter either. So he decides he might as well just come back to San Francisco. And I don't think Sarah knew he came back to San Francisco initially for a long time. As well as this, Hank has gotten to know Max a little bit more and gifts him an old camera where you don't actually have to look directly at people to take photos. It's an old one that you kind of look down into. to take photos of people. Max has gotten really into photography because of this and starts coming to Hank's shop to learn more about photography, help Hank out a little bit here and there, but because he's PDA and whatever, he is not the little helper you might expect, but mostly he's coming to develop the photos and show Hank and talk to Hank about the photos and stuff. And Hank is one of the few people who doesn't treat him differently or weirdly, treats him kind of like an adult in a lot of ways. He doesn't dumb down his language, doesn't hold back on critique, but also he doesn't really feel like he needs to critique Max's photography work much at all. And he's actually really impressed with Max's ability in general. For a while, things are weird between him and Sarah, and they don't get back together for quite a long time. Eventually, they do, but in season 5, episode 11, this is when Max's parents, Adam and something or other, I can't remember her name, they give a book to Hank because something happened that set Max off, and he runs from Hank's photography studio all the way home and wouldn't stop to even speak to Hank. And Hank doesn't really understand that. He doesn't know enough about autism to understand what happened or what's going on for Max. Yeah, he follows him all the way home. I think he also is because Max left a lot of stuff at home as at the photography studio as well. So he followed him all the way home to check to make sure he's okay. His parents talk to him a little bit and he's like, oh yeah, don't worry about it, he'll get over it. This is just kind of what Max is like. As they talk to Hank, and I mean, Adam was already kind of thinking this anyway, that Hank behaves somewhat familiarly. Am I right, lads? So he offers the book on autism that they have for him to read under the guise of like getting to understand and know Max and Max's needs more. And this is where Hank starts thinking. Hank is thinking about things. He does the thing that all of us autistics do, all of us late diagnosed autistics do, where you start reflecting back on your life through the lens of now starting to understand autism better. And he realizes that, like Max, he also has meltdowns. He then proceeds to barge into Sarah's flat because at the moment she is working as like a super of like a block of flats. So he just sort of barges right on in there and she's like, bro, what the fuck? What is going on? And eventually he actually can verbalize and catch her up properly rather than just he says, your brother gave me this book to read about Max, so I'm reading about Max and suddenly I'm not reading about Max anymore, I'm reading about me. And she goes, what do you mean? And he goes, look at this, and shows her the diagnostic criteria, but is reflecting on the fact that he has blamed other people. Maybe it's who he inherently is that is causing some of the issues he's been having in his relationships, particularly as he didn't understand this stuff to be able to communicate it and navigate it with people. And then there's this quiet moment and he goes, you going on a date or something? And she says, sort of. And he goes, I missed another cue. And he's like, no wonder I like this kid. I'm just like him. I'm just like Max. And Sarah goes, I don't know, maybe, but you're doing great. And then he goes back to Max's parents, basically kind of has a similar conversation with, I think, at least Adam. And they talk about the child psychologist, or whatever the fuck type of doctors can assess people for autism. But basically, they saw this particular specialist for Max. Hank is like, give me his details, I need to speak to him. So even though this doctor, psychiatrist, psychologist, whatever the fuck, is a autistic children's doctor, he still goes anyway. Because I mean, also around 2016 is still quite an early point before, it was a good few years before COVID happened, which is where we kind of had quite an influx of people realizing they were autistic or ADHD, because they actually had some time to kind of sit with themselves. And having such easy access to that information now, with the internet generally, TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, people sharing their experiences. Because late diagnosis wasn't impossible before that. It was just a lot less common because it wasn't something shared and talked about so much. And autism generally was still not broadly known about or understood, particularly in more complex ways. When you look at, like, the original diagnosis criteria is based on young white boys of a certain class privilege a lot of the time, and they based a lot of the diagnostics off of this rather than other genders, queer people, people of other races or ethnicities or cultural backgrounds. There's a lot of different ways that neurodivergence shows up based on a lot of environmental settings or environmental factors. And I mean, I think you couldn't even be diagnosed with both ADHD and autism until more recent years. And you actually also couldn't be diagnosed ADHD as an adult until 2008, at least in England anyway. I think that was an England statistic, but that could also maybe be US. There's a lot of things that were in the way of him possibly accessing diagnosis, because he's also been one of the people able to have a job slash run his own business. But also he's running his own business because I don't think he would be somebody who would be a good employee. And at least running his own business, he's doing something that he loves to do. He originally, I think, was like a war zone traveling journalist photographer before he had his daughter as well. So, like, he has a job that he loves that is based off of something that has clearly been like a lifelong special interest, and he runs his own business, so he's able to make adjustments for himself most of the time. Obviously, that has shown to not necessarily always be possible because his job involves customer service, which is not his forte. It's not mine either. Seemingly being able to do these things can often, especially from around 2016 and earlier, can kind of hide the possibility that you are autistic. And he has had relationships, has had romantic relationships with people, but they have not gone very well. They have the same kind of issues. And he also doesn't really seem to have like friends or like a friend group of any kind. The people that he considers his friends are Sarah and, I mean, kind of Max. There is a really nice moment at one point where it's quite funny actually, because this is when Sarah was still, I think, engaged to Mark. Like, her brothers and brother-in-laws do this poker game together somewhat regularly, and Adam invites Hank along, I think almost to like observe him before they had that whole like conversation about autism. He's a stickler for the rules of cards. He's also very good at poker. And I think that was quite nice because it's one of the few times where he has actually been invited somewhere and included in something as himself, to something social as well. It's kind of a rough time for some of the people there anyway, so it doesn't carry on for as long as they usually would play. But afterwards, he offers Adam a cigar because that's another one of his things. He likes certain nice cigars or what the fuck ever. I don't know shit about cigars, man. I am not an old white man. But then, yeah, I think him and Adam sit and hang out and smoke a cigar and chat for a bit. The Braverman family basically open their family to accept him even when he's not with Sarah, because he has just, for one, been so good for Max. It's somewhere for him to go, get out of the house, something for him to do, a passion for him to focus on, and a possibility for employment. Because that's one of the things I think the parents were struggling with is, this perception of their child has changed and now they don't know what his future will look like. And I understand that that is obviously something quite confronting for anybody. Like, it, for me as well, when I have, been diagnosed with a lot of my health issues, as well as being diagnosed ADHD and autistic, it was very confronting for me as well to be like, oh, okay, so that like these futures I thought of for myself may not be possible at all, or they may only be possible with certain adaptations, a lot more work and fighting for my access needs and things like that. And a lot of pacing and planning, the boring shit. I think there is a fine line for parents as well between a reasonable response of, oh, we have to rethink how we take care of our child as well as what his future might be, and have to think differently and more creatively about how to help him adapt to his future and adapt to life in general, versus too much grief over a child that never actually existed because your assumption is entirely based off of an able-bodied and non-disabled world generally. I think if parents spend too much time on that second part, or too much clinging on to this idea and still trying to fit their child into that mold that they are not going to fit, I think that's where things are not good as a parent. But I think it is totally understandable and reasonable to have a period of like a little bit of grief, because it's a grief of a life you expected for somebody or hoped for somebody that you love, and also knowing that their life will be more difficult. That is totally valid to feel grief about something like that. Having that adjustment period that will continue. Like there will always be things that come up that you're like, oh fuck, we did not even think about needing to consider this or adjust this particular issue, etc. I think for the most part, this show does quite well at not being too overtly ableist in this way. Like I said, there are some other things in the show about that plot line that I am not super keen on for a few reasons. They do address some other things a bit later on as well, like around understanding consent, because Max does become a bit of a weirdo stalker harasser to a girl he has a crush on. He's kind of obsessed with her and doesn't listen when the girls say no. And there's a lot on bullying in school and stuff like that. When I was first watching this show, I've seen this actor before who plays Hank in other things, and he plays a relatively similar character in a lot of them. He was Raymond in Everybody Loves Raymond. He was in the recent season of that basketball program with Kate Hudson, Running Point. He's a coach that they bring back. I think I might have seen him in a few other things too. Yeah, so like he's an actor who plays like a relatively similar character a lot. So initially I was sort of like, okay, is this just this actor being like he is in every show, or or is this on purpose? I was kind of like, he's coming across super autistic. Like if I met him, I'd be like, that man's definitely autistic. But I have been burned many times before. I've been burned many times by TV and film where they have a very autistic coded character. Sometimes they even suggest the possibility of that character being autistic. Hello, Dylan from fucking Casualty. But never make it canon, never make it explicitly stated. I don't think it always has to be explicitly stated. I think I said that in my reviews of like Film Club and Heated Rivalry. Like neither of those shows explicitly state that one of their main characters is autistic, but it is spoken about outside of the show that it is a canon thing. Those characters are autistic. It's just that they maybe don't know that yet or haven't uncovered that specifically about themselves. I was like kind of prepared for the show to just kind of continue this autistic coded man without ever doubling down and actually saying it. But this show actually did. He doesn't necessarily get an official diagnosis because the doctor that he was speaking to is a child's doctor, and he is like, I can't technically diagnose you because one, you're an adult, but two, it requires you filling in a bunch of forms and several hours of me talking to you about things. But he's like, okay, but like out of 10 Just like, how much percentage sure do you think I'm probably autistic though? And he's like, yeah, I'm pretty sure you're probably autistic though, man. And he's like, that's good enough for me. And that's also, again, on that sort of topic of whether you need or should get official diagnoses is highly dependent on your own needs and experiences. A lot of people would probably just benefit from a professional being like, yeah, I'm pretty sure you're autistic, even without like an official assessment and diagnosis, particularly if you don't feel like you need adjustments or support. If you already have those kinds of things in place, like he does, he works for himself, he's able to like make those adjustments for himself anyway and has been doing it for a long time. Mostly just knowing will help him to reflect on how he is in his relationships with other people, which is where he feels like he is mostly struggling, failing, and feels a lot of shame about. Eventually in the show, he gets back onto like a good page with his ex, because he's like, you know what, you were fucking right. I was the worst. I'm really sorry, but I've realized I'm autistic. And she's like, what the fuck? And then she's like, actually, that tracks. Never mind. But she appreciated him admitting it and validating the fact that she had a hard time with him because of something that he didn't understand to know or reflect on. Again, it's a fine line between you're difficult because you're autistic and being autistic can make things hard. So you need to be aware of those things and communicate those things to either reflect on yourself or discuss with the people in your life so they can adapt to like how they speak to you and how you navigate those kinds of conversations and those kinds of struggles. Because when he gets back together with Sarah, she knows this about him by that point, I think. And because she's already had some experience of dealing with Max generally, but she's also seen them together and had some experience of talking with Hank anyway, she still struggles too, because he's not perfect. He's just starting this kind of journey of understanding what he does automatically that maybe, isn't great for relationships. But he does say to her, like, you just got to say it to me. You've just got to tell me, because I'm not really sure if I'll know without you saying something. Obviously, she does also find that hard because she feels like, and I think a lot of people feel this way as well, that he should be able to work that out. He should be able to work out when she's upset about something he has done or said. And it's like eventually as well, when you learn to understand those things about yourself, it does become easier to start understanding where other people might be coming from or figuring out when someone might be upset with you because of something you've done or said that you didn't realize came out that way, or didn't mean in the way that you said it, because you maybe aren't great at saying things in the way you exactly want them to be said. Hello, Alexithymia, also a video I made. And eventually he does start picking up on those things without her needing to explicitly say it or call it out all the time. There is also a lot of really lovely moments between Hank and Sarah's dad. He's the only person who asked Sarah's dad for, I don't know, not necessarily permission, but like his blessing. That's the one. His blessing to ask Sarah for her hand in marriage. They kind of already talked and agreed to get married, but he also wanted to go and talk to her dad like that. And her dad really appreciated him coming to him and asking, because she's been engaged / married a few times and nobody has ever, I don't know, nobody has really wanted to show that respect to her family, but also hasn't really been able to actually merge with her family, which I think is also so interesting and funny, that her family actually loved and got on with the weird autistic man. Like, their family is weird as shit. They are definitely neurodivergent, in my opinion. Most of them are definitely ADHD as shit. But I also, I just really love the fact that Sarah's had a few long-term partners that the family just didn't like. The family just did not get on with them, kind of kept them at an arm's distance. They weren't able to integrate themselves into the Braverman family. But he has. He did. And I think a lot of that was down to the fact that he was just so good with Max and wanted to learn how to, support Max. And even though he is weird and awkward when socializing, they can also see that he really loves Sarah. Oh, there's some other really great bits too with her kids as well that was really important. That last season of the show, so much happened with the family. Her daughter finds out she's pregnant and decides to keep the baby and wasn't going to tell the dad of her baby, but then she gets contacted that he is in hospital from an accident or something, and she is completely hysterical. So he literally drives her all the way to a different, like, to this other state, because he knows that the way, like, her emotions, she is not safe to drive herself. So he drives her. He just fucking drives her, which, is really, it really shows how much he cares. He may not say or talk about how much he cares, but he will do things. He will show he cares with certain, acts like that. And then later, the dad of the family has been having a lot of health issues and he has to go and have emergency surgery. But Sarah's son, I think, is still at college and his car broke down. Yeah, Hank's like, I'll go and get him. Don't worry about it. So he does. And they have a good conversation in the car. And, well, initially not such a great conversation because obviously there's a lot of shit happening and Hank is not very good at the socialization part. He respects the bluntness of the son, whose name I can't fucking remember right now, but he was in 13 Reasons Why. And Boots or something, whatever the fuck. He's like, can we just, like, not talk? And he's like, I respect that, don't worry. But then they have another conversation in the canteen together of the hospital, and they get on kind of the same page. He starts to respect Hank and actually really likes Hank. And obviously Hank as well stays at the hospital the whole time. He sees that the partners of the family all kind of have, like, roles they do and take on. Like the other sister in the family, her, I think, ex-husband at the time as well, just rocks up with, like, coffee and food. They all kind of have their, like, role that they have, and he doesn't really have a role because he's so new to this family still and so awkward with things. But also Sarah is not very good at asking for help or asking for what she needs. And it's actually at the hospital where he proposes to her. He's like, I've realized how much I fucking love you and I want to marry you. Like, I don't have a ring and I know that a lot's going on right now, so you don't have to answer me right now, but I just need to tell you I love you and I want to spend the rest of my life with you. And she's like, I can't use my brain right now, but we'll talk about this later, okay? Okay, amazing. So yeah, there's just all these really lovely moments that are just so heartwarming for me, particularly as a lot of autistic stories have been just like tragedy and look how awful this autistic person is, and oh, autistic people are the worst kind of vibes. Especially like as this is just a slice of life kind of show, it's kind of like, oh wow, this is what an autistic person's life could look like. This is what joining somebody else's family could be like if more people could learn to understand and accept autistic people and autistic people's, like, differences and access needs and stuff. So yeah, I think this is personally maybe one of my favorite depictions of a canonically autistic adult who wasn't diagnosed when they were younger, because a lot of this character feels very familiar to me. There's also a lot of things that diverge from the stereotype or diverge from the typical things you expect from an autistic person, or, are not really considered in the DSM for diagnosing autistic people. The fact that his main interest, hobby, and job is creative would not be considered typically autistic back, 2016 and earlier. And also, like I said, the fact that he's had romantic relationships, has a child, those sorts of things are not considered typical for the expectation of autistic people years ago. Whereas we also understand now a lot of us who have been diagnosed later are also seeing in our older family members the same autistic traits that we notice in ourselves. But obviously they've, gotten married, had children, have jobs. There are a lot of functioning, capitalistic functioning, autistic people who had to function like that because autism was not diagnosed in working class people, people of color, women, etc., for a very long time. And if it was super rare. And often it was because you have much higher support needs or are showing much more typical autistic traits and maybe aren't masking or aren't able to mask as much as maybe lower support needs autistic people. Because yeah, that's kind of my experience. Is most of my family are autistic as fuck, but they have never been picked up. But every anecdote they tell me about hobbies, interests they've had, relationships, friendships they've had, struggles they've had in that kind of way just continues to spell out the fact that there is autism in my family tree. Autism is proving to definitely be hereditary, that kind of vibe. So I really liked this depiction. I really liked the way the actor performed the character and performed these plot lines. I really liked how this show was probably one of the few shows I've even really found generally to cover the late diagnosed as well, the late diagnosis experience. Because yeah, I still think a lot of autistic representation is still characters who are diagnosed as children, some high masking, some not. The level of support needs varies in the characters that you do see on TV, but I still feel like there is that kind of general lacking of canon late diagnosed autistic people. And I would love to see more experiences like that. I know somebody mentioned, I think, a French film or TV show under my first Astrid Murder in Paris slash patients video. So I do have that saved somewhere. But if anybody else has other recommendations for shows or films that do cover the sort of late diagnosed experience, I would love to know because I can't really think of any off the top of my head. I can think of a bunch of different autistic representations, ones that I think are good and ones that I think are bad, but that's also just my opinion, not necessarily like word for word everyone's feelings. But yeah, I would love to see more of the late diagnosed experience of plot lines and stuff like that. So please leave your recommendations in the comments section. But yeah, so let me know as well if you've seen Parenthood, what you thought of this particular plot line. It's just one I wanted to share and talk about because it is the only time I've actually been correct where I was like, that character is really autistic. And then the show actually went and did it. And it does end happily ever after. The last episode is literally Hank and Sarah's wedding. I love this show. I did go back and watch basically all of the seasons he was in to kind of make some of these notes. And it's definitely a show that I would happily go back and watch multiple times. It may be a show that's going to get on my to buy on DVD list. But yeah, let me know your thoughts on the show. Let me know your thoughts on what I've said in the video. Give me your recommendations for other late diagnosed autistic stories. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. And yeah, that's my video for this week, and I will see you next week. Bye.